Hey everybody! It's that time of the week again. Come gather around me, people. We're running a little bit behind here at the Jim Alberti's Theater, but we are still coming to you live from Austin, Texas, where we are keeping it weird. Because weirdness, well, all the weirdos know that anything that's not weird is pretty weird. What you got there, Rachel? Everybody say hi to Rachel. She's working props for you. This is a new season, my friends. This is season 4. We have been on the air longer than Star Trek, and today is January the 24th. If you can afford to support me or this broadcast, you can do so through PayPal at Bald Chandler, Venmo, The Chris Chandler Show, or Patreon, The Chris Chandler Show. You guys up for a story? Say, tell us a story, Chandler. Type it out on your keyboards. Why weren't you here last week? Oh, it was my birthday. I'm sorry I missed last week. And already in season 4, I accidentally did one of them on a Monday. But that's just the way it goes. Are you guys up for a story? 'Cause I want to tell you a story. I just had a birthday, and this seems like the appropriate story to tell. Type it out on your keyboards. And don't forget, after we do this poem of the week, we will have your moment of spin. Oh, it's good to be back here in the Jim Alberti Theater, right here in the middle of Peacock Blue Studios in Austin, Texas. And this story will start off with, I think, my favorite line that I have ever written as an opening line. And it goes like this. It was somewhere between the beginning of time and the end of time. It was a little closer to the end of time, I think, but I can't say for sure because I have been to St. Augustine, Florida. I have. And you know what's in St. Augustine, Florida, right? That's right. I have drunk from the fountain of youth. I have. I stood in line for over an hour and I paid $11 for the experience, and that was with the AAA discount. Now, I am not making this up. The water from the fountain of youth was actually served to me in a disposable cup by a well-tanned teenager in a red and gold conquistador outfit. Now, I didn't think about it much until later that afternoon. I was at my friend's place in the suburbs, and there was that same kid, still wearing the red and gold conquistador outfit, sunning himself in the water. He was held afloat by a life-sized, inflatable alligator. Its tail wrapped around one side of him, and its snout around the other. And in its mouth was a yellow beer koozie, maintaining an ice-cold Corona. This kid seemed to be one of those people who never gets off work, as if he actually enjoyed being employed by the Chamber of Commerce. Or maybe he had matched up his list of hobbies to one of those online job searches, and it matched him up with the red and gold conquistador outfit, and he said, "This is what I want to do with the rest of my life." "Welcome to St. Augustine," he said. "The oldest city in the United States. Why, it was here that Ponce de Leon and I searched for the fountain of youth. I was only 19 years old at the time." This kid's taking his character a little too far, I thought. Sort of like George W. Bush or Donald Trump thinking they really did get elected president. Now, most people think of the fountain of youth as just being some foolish Indian myth. I don't, I thought. Why else would they buy all those ads for minoxidil, Viagra, and silicone breast implants? As for me, I keep my Viagra right next to my Prozac. But you know, if either one of them worked, I really wouldn't need the other one. There must have been some sort of a language barrier, he explained, because the Calusa Indians were not talking about a fountain of youth that could melt away cellulite or prevent gingivitis. They were talking about the youth of the species, not the individual. It's why when the Spanish first came here in search of decent Indian food, and also in search of gold and fresh slaves, the free African sailors that came over with them started putting two and two together that hostile Indians who knew the territory better than they did didn't make such good slaves, and that the Africans might become the very slaves the Spanish were in search of. So the Africans built a fort for their own protection, adjacent to the famous Spanish fort. Yes, the first blacks in America were not slaves, and the first American slaves were not black. And this is well before Plymouth Rock landed on the Indians. Mention that the next time you meet some Boston blue blood boasting of how long ago his ancestors on the Mayflower arrived here. There seems to be something in the water, he explained, as he leisurely paddled across the swimming pool. And those African slaves I mentioned before knew this too, because they adopted Christian stories about following the drinking gourd and crossing the river of eternal life, or at least crossing the river from slave territories into free ones, because you got to remember that Florida was free until it became a part of the United States. It's kind of ironic that the mythology of their captors helped these slaves escape the mythology of their captors. And the Seminoles took these former slaves in, gave them room and board, gave them jobs in their casinos. The Indian cultures and the African cultures mixed, and together they invented menthol cigarettes. But let me tell you, when Colonel Sanders' faithful family retainer teamed up, when Colonel Sanders, who was settling just north of there, heard about free black people living in their own community, he tried to put a stop to it, hired a guy by the name of Andrew Jackson. But let me tell you, Colonel Sanders' faithful family retainers teamed up with the Florida State Seminole, and Andrew Jackson was forced to surrender while slinking back to Washington, D.C. to declare victory and later become president. It's not the only time that defeat in Florida has led to becoming president, but that's a different story. As for the Seminole, they remain unconquered to this day. Think about that the next time you go feeding a green picture of Andrew Jackson into a slot machine. Perhaps the casinos are the Indians' way of paying white people back for bringing them the 40-ouncer. I wondered why he hadn't mentioned that back at the tourist trap. Now, I'm not going to bore you with all the details about the first slaves to be freed by the Emancipation Proclamation, or the first big race riot that eventually led to the end of segregation, all happening in St. Augustine, Florida. I'll just say that it happened. And that in the end, a man named after Martin Luther had a dream that eventually came true. That's not to say that he was the only one that had that dream, or that the present is particularly auspicious. Because right now, there are far too many descendants of former slaves working minimum wage jobs, using the very water from the fountain of youth just to water the emerald lawns of the Ponce de Leon Golf and Conference Center. But it's a glass half empty, half full question, to which I say, get a smaller glass. There are millions of problems in this world. A million of them right here, right now. But my friends, what that means is that there are a million answers, a million voices, and a million dreams. And every dream does come true. It's all in the way you interpret it. Martin Luther, too, had a dream, and so did Ponce de Leon. Ponce de Leon's did not interpret his dream in the right way, and his quest in the wrong pursuit wound up getting him killed about 100 miles south of St. Augustine. And 100 miles south of St. Augustine, in a place we now know as Cape Canaveral, the roosters said it best. They began crowing as roosters do, but the thing is, the dawn was not yet upon us, yet somehow the whole horizon bloomed at once. The horizon hurled yellow rage across the water's edge. Thousands of miles an hour, a blue-gray ribbon suddenly streaked towards the open arms of heaven. The sky rumbled. Canada geese honked across the water befuddled. And then a long trail of God's own cigar smoke is all that remained. It seems that the Hubble telescope was again in need of repair. Our pictures of the universe had become blurry. The space shuttle was making a house call that morning, and 3 astronauts were deployed with a bottle of Windex to go clean its mirrors. The infinite is smaller somehow. That's why I said, get a smaller glass. And you know, if you think about it, from up there, Florida might just look like this giant, limp tallywhacker, hanging flaccid from the beast now known as the United States. But if you think about it, from that drooping Johnson, mankind ejaculates into the cosmos, shooting the seeds of the fountain of youth to swim the heavens in search of eternal creation. We have walked on the moon. Satellites do probe the galaxies. There is a fountain of youth, but it's a fountain of youth that has nothing to do with minoxidil, Viagra, or silicone breast implant. And as I thought about that, the fountain of youth, not the silicone breast implants, I found myself drifting back into consciousness in a swimming pool in St. Augustine, Florida, held afloat by a life-sized inflatable alligator, my corona no longer ice cold, wondering how do I interpret this dream. This has been your Poem of the Week. We are experiencing a technical difficulty. Hang around for your moment of spin. Hey, how y'all doing? Thanks for gathering around. It's been a minute since we've been back here in the Jim Alberti Theater. And I was very ambitious trying to pull that one off on the first week back. It's time for your moment of spin. Give me a number between 1 and 3. While you're looking for a number, I want to tell you that I wrote that poem a good while ago. It's a much older one, and I sent it out on my newsletter after I saw the night launch of the space shuttle. And someone who was on my newsletter feed had a friend that was actually an astronaut on that flight, and that poem was read in outer space. It's a true story. We have a number between 1 and 3. Oh, she's scrolling. So what you got, Rachel?
Give me 3.
Number 3. Observations from a roadside diner. And a number between 1 and 130.
Eileen said 1.5, but I'm going to call that 15. Eileen.
Eileen. Number 15. That rhymes. Eileen, 15. I sometimes mistake my imagination for my memory. We've been listening to Pete Weiss and the Weistronauts, and we will see you next Tuesday right here in Austin, Texas. Thanks for gathering around. Thanks to Rachel. Say hi to Rachel, y'all.
Hi, y'all.